Right guys, welcome back to the Animal Crossing Every Possible Fence video series. In this lesson we're going to make a start. So we broke it down in the last video. We're going to create those discrete systems and we're going to bring it all together. So let's start off by placing down our first node, and that will be a geometry node. Okay, so we're at object level. This is our first geometry container and we're going to call this fence tool. Because that's what it is. It's not a fence asset, it's a fence tool because it's a tool that makes fences. All right. So double click to jump inside that. We're now in the geometry context. You can see here in the top right, geometry context. So let's first of all just establish this curve that we need to, that will dictate the outline of our fence. So I can drop down a curve node. Okay. And with the curve node selected, I'm going to do space 2 to jump to top viewport. I'm going to hold down X and select grid snapping and let go of X. Okay, so now we can see we've got grid snapping, and I'm just going to draw out a random shape. So this will be our very funky fence shape. All right. It's not really like any fence I've ever seen, but okay, we can select those points and just tweak it if we wish. So this will be our initial fence outline. Okay. So as we sort of said, what we want to do is we want to copy our fence geometry onto these points, but we need a few more points before we can do that. So a node that can do that for us is the resample node. So just pressing tab over the network view and to start typing resample will bring up the resample node. We'll make that connection and then we'll put the display flag on the resample node, and there you'll see straight away, if we turn on our point display, which is this little dot here, display points, we can see that the resample node has added a whole bunch of points along that geometry. Obviously that's far too many for our fence, so we could just take this length slider here and just sort of drag it till we get something that's a bit more kind of spaced out. And I'm imagining at the moment these fence posts copied onto it, so we could go something like that. And as you can see, the resample node has sort of softened our curve a little bit. We don't want that. We want to tell it to resample along the polygon edge. Okay, so we've maintained those sharp angles. Cool. So with that, that's our initial curve set up, believe it or not. And it's completely, as you can see, we can select the curve node at the top and we can go back and make some changes. And because of the way the data flows down the network, you can see that the resample node is keeping up and is resampling that curve for us. Okay, so let's make a start on our first piece of geometry. Okay, and just to keep things separate and keep things a little bit organized, I'm going to create the fence geometry in its own geometry object and then bring it into the fence tool. Okay, so in fact no, we'll do it here. So let's drop down a box. Okay, so this is just a box geometry. I'm going to put the display flag on that, and as you can see we lose visibility of our base curve because we're now focusing in on this box. I'm going to press space F over the viewport to frame up on this box, and I'm going to make some adjustments to this and we'll make some simple fence geometry. Okay, currently the center point of the box is sat on the in the middle of the grid. We don't want that. We want it to be sat flat on the grid. So we could do that if we just take a look at the size of the box here. We've got size 1. So if we move the center up by half, so 0.5, the box is now sat on the grid. Okay. So let's just say, and we're working in meters in Houdini, so 1 meter for a fence post, a little bit high, so we'll say 0.7. Okay, and now you see we've lost this, it's no longer sitting on the grid. So what Houdini allows us to do, it allows us to link parameters together so that we can reference them. And what I want to reference is this Y size. I want that to be in the center divided by 2. Okay, so it always sits on the floor. Okay, so the way we can do that, we could just grab that parameter, so select it, left click and drag, and then drop it in the center Y, and then it'll ask for a channel reference. So this is the reference that we want. We can do a relative channel reference here. Okay, so now if we just middle click on this center icon here, you can see that these two channels are linked. So whatever I put, that channel is now linked to it. Okay, the relationship we want to build is that this parameter here is half of this one, so we can just divide that by 2. And there you go, you can see our box is now sat perfectly on the origin no matter what value we plug into our height. So we say 0.7, and then I'm just going to shape this box in the viewport. So with the box selected, if you don't see this red outline, you can just press enter on your keyboard and it should appear. If I hold down shift, I can make some changes. I'm just going to hold down X, turn off my grid snapping. If I hold down shift, I can make some symmetrical changes to that. And then we'll bring the sides in, and we're just creating a basic plank shape. Okay, so maybe it's a bit too thick, something like that. Alright, so this could be our first fence post done if you wanted. But what we'll do is we'll put a bevel on this. So I want to bevel some edges. Okay. Now currently, the active tool, the tool that I'm working on, is the box tool here. Okay. So the box tool doesn't allow me to select components. Alright. So we need to go over to the select tool, and that's this arrow here. So if I press this, we get the traditional sort of component selection tools here. Alright, so I can select edges, and just for personal preference I'm going to press Shift and W to turn on edge faces. I'm going to select this edge and this edge. Okay, and then over the viewport I'm going to press Tab and start typing bevel, and the poly bevel comes up. Just put that down. And then the poly bevel is just as you'll find it in Maya or Max, it just bevels things. So with those edges selected, we can just middle click on the value and just drag that to create like a fence post type shape. Something like that. Alright. And then to create that sort of Animal Crossing kind of look that we sort of identified, I'm just going to scale in this bottom face. So again, be mindful of what tool you're currently using. I'm currently in the poly bevel tool. Alright, so poly bevel doesn't have any, it just poly bevels. You know, you can't select faces or anything like that without altering the poly bevel. So we need to again go back to the select tool, select our face selection, and we'll just grab that face at the bottom there. And now we need to edit this face, so we can press E on the keyboard to bring up the scale tool. Okay, and take a look what's happened in the network view. Going back to what I was saying about how in Houdini everything is a node, absolutely everything. So if you want to move some vertices or move a polygonal face, you need to put down an edit SOP or an edit operator, and that's what Houdini's done for us when we pressed E to bring up that scale tool. So with that, I'm just going to scale it down on the X and Z axis a little bit just to create that tapered effect. So something like that. And looking at my reference and then looking at this, it seems that this is far too tall for our reference. So using the network view like almost like a big undo list, we can step back up these nodes all the way up to this box here, and we can take our height value, and if we middle click on it, we can just drag to scale that down to get something closer to our reference. And as you can see, the data is just flowing straight down the network to our display flag. So all those changes we've made, all those operations we've made, still continue through. Cool. One final thing to this, what I want to do is just apply another poly bevel. So over the network view, I'm going to press Tab, start typing poly bevel, and this time I'm going to plug it directly in myself in the network view. Put the display flag on it, and then I'm just going to put a very, very slight bevel on it just to soften those edges. Okay, so again, this shouldn't be too terrifying to you guys who are already familiar with 3D Studio Max or Maya or Blender. This is just the same, it's just done in a slightly, in a node-based way rather than clicking on tools and then clicking on components. So it's an important difference. One final thing, we'll drop down a normal node just to give ourselves some face-weighted normals. And we're going to set that over to face area. And you can dial in that value to whatever seems to work for you. So with that, I'm going to turn off my point display, press Shift W, and there we go, there's our first fence post. Okay. So with our first fence post done, to keep myself nice and neat and tidy, I'm going to select all of those nodes that make up my fence post, and I'm going to collapse them into a subnet. Okay, so it just tidies my network up a bit. So you can click on this little box here into subnet, and I'm going to call this fence post. All right. In the next video, we'll take a look at how we can incorporate this fence post into our curve asset and start copying things along. So I'll see you there. Thanks.